So we've got the data. Um, we're going to start this classification process. And I'm going to collapse that whole group. That's the computer's problem, not mine. And I'm going to bring up the oops, I did not mean to put that in the group. I meant to bring it above the group. That is forest layer, and that is water layer. And let's take a look at those. Here's the is forest layer. So white pixels represent forest, and black pixels represent the absence of forest. We could look at the classes in more detail, of course, in the actual NLCD data, but we're all about simplicity right now. So this is, for our study question here, we really just want to know, is it or is it forest? I know from experience, however, that there's one more type of land cover that we need to think about, and that's water. And so here's the raster mask that shows where water is and where water isn't. And so we're going to try to create a simple classification that just identifies 3 types on the landscape. I'll turn this color there back on. The 3 types, of course, are forest, what we really want to know, water, just because if we don't identify water, I know from experience it gets really mixed up in the other categories, and then non-forest terrestrial land cover. So basically the everything else category. And so we are going to go, I'm going to click here to the training input tab on this doc. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new training input file. So I click this create new training input. I'm just going to call this forest, water, other, because those are going to be my 3 categories. And we have a number of different ways we could do this here. So the main process, I'm going to turn we'll leave the color band on for a moment. The main process here is we're going to go around and we're going to train the tool about what in the underlying imagery is forest and what is water and what is other terrestrial land cover. And yeah, like I said, there's a number of ways to do it. There's 2 different interactive ways to do it that I'll walk you through here. And you also can just upload a vector layer, polygons presumably, that define the areas. So it would actually be possible to take the NLCD data and create a polygon layer that defines, the full extent of forest, and then use that to train the algorithm. That's in part the computational needs for that are massive. And then secondly, it's just a little bit less interesting than doing it interactively. So we're going to do it interactively today. But you should know in the future, if you want to upload a vector data set to define these ROIs, regions of interest, they're called, to train the algorithm, you can do that. So down here at the bottom of this window, we have 2 things. We have macro class and we have class. And with each of those, we have a name and we have an ID. So the macro class name, let's start with this forest category. The idea with macro class and class is you can sort of have 2 different hierarchical levels in your classification. We're only actually going to use one level, so we're going to completely ignore class. We're just going to work at the macro class level. But it's useful. It's a useful concept in that you could, like the NLCD has a couple types of forest. It has riparian forest, it has evergreen forest, and it has deciduous forest, and it has another type or two that I can't recall. Um, you could have those as these classes within the macro class. We're not going to pay attention to that distinction for now, but it can be useful. So let's go ahead and identify um, our first piece of forest. I'm going to turn off this color band from the modus, and I'm going to turn on the is forest layer. And so remember, in the is forest layer, we'll take a look here to remind ourselves the whites are ones. That means there is forest there, and the blacks are zeros. And so our goal in our classification scheme is to extend the NLCD data. And so we're really going to try to come up with training inputs that match this NLCD data as much as possible. So there's a couple ways to do it. One way, you can click on this tool right here, this create a region of interest polygon, and then you can manually go in here and define a polygon. So, I mean, it's almost trivially easy because there's just so much forest. So I'm just going to create an arbitrary polygon. So I'm left clicking to create some points along the boundary. I'm just creating an arbitrary polygon here that contains forest. This one line running down the middle is just the very vague extent of the study area I gave you guys, just so we're all looking at the same thing. And then I right click for my last point. So there's no real significance behind that shape I just made. It's just a polygon that I drew that, based on this NLCD definition, contains forest. Okay, so it's macro class 1. I'm not worried about class, and the macro class name is forest. So I'm going to save this region of interest. Ooh, that's fun. Uh-oh.